letters at 1 p.m. making their cases for both for and against his release here, and it appears that the judge sided with the prosecution. They attached a letter from celebrity stylist and Cassie Ventura's friend Deontay Nash, who said that he also suffered violence at the hands of Combs, and urged the judge not to release him, saying that that would send a dangerous message. And Cassie Ventura's lawyer also told the judge that she felt that he would pose a danger to alleged victims like herself and the community as well. Now, as you pointed out, the judge said, quote, "It is impossible for the defendant to demonstrate that he poses no danger to the community." And he cited his domestic violence that we saw in this trial over and over as part of the justification for his decision here. And he said that he had a propensity for violence. And remember, this is something that the defense did not deny in this trial. They agreed that Combs can be violent. They agreed that Combs can be abusive. You see the images of that 2016 video on your screen there that has now become infamous. It was really a key part of this case. The jury saw it multiple times. It has been seen around the world on, news coverage and social media as well. So at this point, Combs will go back to MDC Brooklyn. That's where he's been held since September of last year when he was arrested by federal authorities. So he will be going back there until his sentencing date, which we have now learned is scheduled for October 3rd at 10 a.m., Alex.
Thank you for that, Rena. I want to go to ABC News contributor and trial attorney Brian Buckmeyer. And Brian, we're learning that as the judge made his ruling here denying Diddy's release, Combs, he appeared to look at his lawyers. As the judge read that decision, his head was largely down, though he did whisper to one of his attorneys. And, that's a stark difference from how he came into the courthouse, smiling and greeting supporters. But I'm curious, in your professional expertise, does this decision, does it surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me. In fact, I assumed that this judge would deny any request for bail. And I think, and again, I'm not at the table, but I understand, I know some of these defense attorneys, what probably happened was, like what we all do as a defense attorneys, we tell our client, this is how we hope it goes. If it goes in our favor, then you're going to walk out. If it doesn't go in our favor, then here are the plans that we can try to make this work. And what I think Sean Combs is probably whispering to his attorneys and what they're listening to is, what's next? And what's possibly next for Sean Combs is what's called a writ of habeas corpus, where the defense will file a writ to go to a higher court, potentially the Second Circuit, and say that this judge erred in not providing bail for Sean Combs. I would not be surprised if the document is not being drafted now or shortly tomorrow morning, that they request to go to a higher court to try to get another bite of the apple for trying to release Sean Combs. It's the 4th of July weekend, so it might be difficult, but maybe Monday or Tuesday, they'll try to set something up in the near future.
Well, and I want to go to ABC News contributor, legal contributor and criminal defense attorney Bernardo Villalona. Bernardo, we're just getting this new note from the district judge in this case. He did not weigh in on Combs's future sentencing, but did note that there is a wide divide, he said, between what the prosecution and defense attorneys have suggested for a sentence. Can you break down to us what is his exposure looking like here, and what are some of the guidelines there?
Yeah, so one thing that is definitely definite in terms that both sides do agree is that the maximum sentence as to each count is 10 years and that it can run consecutive up to 20 years. However, there's something that's called the criminal sentencing guideline recommendation. And in those recommendations, in that guideline, it takes into account the transportation to engage in prostitution, the acts that took place, how many of them took place, how did it take place, and who was involved in those acts. And for each of those items that were taken into consideration, points are assigned to them. So depending on how many points are assigned to each of those acts, that would determine the range, the sentencing guideline range that Sean Combs could face. Look, in the end, the Department of Probation is going to do their independent calculation as to what the guidelines are, and the judge is going to take his cue from the Department of Probation. And ultimately, ultimately, at the time of sentencing, there will be a hearing to determine what are those guidelines. And if there's any case where the guidelines make a difference, it's going to be this case, for the reason being that there's no mandatory minimum. And I am sure that Judge Subramanian is not going to look to go below the guidelines in handing out a sentence to Sean Combs, because this is not your typical transportation to engage in prostitution. Prime example, when the prosecution put up a picture of 27 men that were hired to engage in sexual acts with either Jade or Cassie, or sometimes with the both of them sharing the same men at different occasions.
Well, and Bernardo, one other thing that we're seeing from one of Diddy's attorneys, they're asking for him to be sentenced as soon as possible. Why is that?
Because they believe in their mind that Sean Combs would be eligible for a lesser sentence, that the judge will give him a lesser sentence than whatever the guidelines recommend. And it is in the prerogative of the judge to give a below guideline sentence, which could equal out to Sean Combs being released as soon as the date of sentence. So that's why they are asking for an immediate sentencing date. But what's going to be the bump in the road is how long the Department of Probation takes in interviewing Sean Combs and conducting their independent investigation for this pre-sentence report. This pre-sentence report is not going to be 2 or 3 pages. We are talking about over 10 or 20 pages that this report is going to encompass, that's going to take into account the life of Sean Combs from when he was born up until the day of sentencing, his actions in custody, what he has been done or even accused of doing, his prior bad acts, interviews with family members, interviews with other people, interviews with the victims of this case. All of that is going to be encompassed into this report that ultimately will be a recommendation for this judge to make the ultimate decision as to what should be the sentence in determining deterrence, accountability, and rehabilitation for Sean Combs for these 2 acts that he's been found guilty of.
Well, Bernardo, I appreciate that breakdown, and if you're able to, I'd love for you to stick around. But I want to go to jury consultant Ross Suter, who's with us right now. And Ross, listen, we talk about these 8 men and 4 women that held the fate of Sean Diddy Combs's life in their hands, essentially. Something that was a point that was made earlier today in our coverage was that oftentimes, we look at the race or sex of a jury, but oftentimes, the more consequential question is the age in what we're looking for here, in terms of sentences that are handed down. What do you make of where the jury stood with this verdict?
Well, I do believe that they had a pretty diverse jury pool. You could see that they, I think it was the prostitution claims in those issues were definitely clear to them, and they struggled a little bit more with the allegations of the more abstract legal concepts. But they have a very diverse jury makeup, different backgrounds, ethnicities, ages, and it's why it's difficult to read the tea leaves and to know what a jury panel is going to do ultimately at the end of the day. We want to get a sense of what themes, what cases, what storylines and whatnot will actually resonate with jurors, or with the greatest amount of jurors, so that they're going to be able to see whomever's side of the story, whether it's the prosecution or the defense.
Yeah. Ross, I really appreciate that. And if you don't mind sticking around for a bit, but I wanted to go to ABC News contributor and senior entertainment reporter for ESPN's Anscape, Kelly Carter, who's been following this along with us. And Kelly, one of the things that struck me the most about the last half hour, if you will, the notes that we're getting out of the courtroom, we're hearing about, Diddy with his head down. They say that, he's occasionally been whispering to his attorney, but his head's been down. It also appears that he's largely motionless at the counsel table right now, according to the latest note from our team inside there. And that's a stark stark departure from how he entered, smiling and greeting supporters, and also how he's known as a personality. I mean, this is an individual who is built a brand essentially around being the life of the party, and at one point it even temporarily changed his name to Love, because he always had this magnetic smile. But this is quite the change.
Yeah, this is a stark difference from the kind of charismatic person, as you really accurately described, that we've come to know, for the last 30 years. I mean, imagine being the person who is known for getting the party started, essentially, in whatever room or space he's in, finding themselves under the weight of all of these charges, and now having to deal with the guilty verdict on 2 of those charges, and trying to figure out what the immediate future looks like for him. It's a stark difference from who we have come to know, and that really, I think, in a lot of ways gives definition and really kind of illustrates exactly, where his frame of mind is right now, kind of having that understanding that he's not, in fact, going home today after a long summer of a trial and kind of everything being aired out for better or for worse. So I think it's just another kind of thing that we're going to be talking about, because this is just so different from what we normally know of him.
Yeah, no, well put. And I know Rena Roy is still outside the courthouse there. And Rena, as we're learning more about what the judge has told Diddy's defense team, he said that this detention is in part because of the argument used by his lawyers to secure his partial acquittal, that Combs engaged in domestic violence but not in sex trafficking. And he said that, from the outset, the defense team said that in this case, it did have violence.
Yeah, this is something, Alex, that we heard over and over in this trial from defense attorneys. They said, hey, Sean Combs may be a jerk, he may be an abuser, he may be guilty of domestic violence, but that's not what this case is about. We heard them say that to the jury over and over, and that was their defense strategy. And now it seems the judge is bringing that right back to them today. As you said, he said full-throatedly in your closing argument, told the jury that there was violence here, and domestic violence is violence, the judge said. You said this was a case that did have violence. So as to the basic question of violence, you conceded that in your closing. So he brought that right back to defense attorneys today before Sean Combs heads back to that prison cell.
All right. Rena, Kelly, Brian, and Ross, thank you all. And the other trial that we've been monitoring, Brian Kohberger, the suspect in the King Road murders, has admitted to killing 4 University of Idaho students in November of 2022. Kohberger officially pleading guilty to all 4 counts of murder in a court hearing today, sparing him from the death penalty.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
Did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
As part of the plea deal, Kohberger will be sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences for murder and 10 years for burglary in the killings of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, the 4 college students fatally stabbed inside of their off-campus house in the small town of Moscow, Idaho. The victims' loved ones were inside the courtroom today, one family telling ABC News that they support the plea agreements, but others expressing frustration over the deal. And switching gears here, severe storms on the move over parts of the country.